much fun.
This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy.
Start your day with Good Morning America's Ray of Sunshine, highlighting the best of America and helping
make dreams come true. Wow. I'm just so happy. It is so good.
Get ready to smile and put the good into your morning, America, because...
You know what will make the morning better? A little ray of sunshine.
Why do so many people start their day here?
From ABC News, this is Start Here.
To be in the know and get a different take on the day's top stories.
A lot of news today, so let's get into it.
Listen now to the Daily News Podcast honored with 4 Edward R. Murrow Awards and see why the New York Times calls it a news podcast worth listening to. Start Here, ABC News. Make it your daily first listen.
Now, that's a part of the story I bet you didn't see coming.
Wherever you get your podcasts, Start Here.
I want to take you now to Philly, where Vice President Kamala Harris is being interviewed by the panel from the National Association of Black Journalists. You remember former President Trump did this as well. Now it's the VP's turn.
Well, first of all, let me just say it is good to be with the National Association of Black Journalists, and I thank you for the work you do and that your members do every day. It is very important that we ensure that this organization and your members always have the resources and the platforms to deliver the voices that must be heard. So I thank you for hosting me today. 4 years ago, when we came in during the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. We came in during the worst public health epidemic in centuries. We came in after the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And a lot of it due in large part to the mismanagement by the former president as it relates to COVID and obviously January 6th. And we had then a lot of work to do to clean up a mess. As of today, we have created over 16 million new jobs, over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs. We have the lowest Black unemployment rate in generations. We have invested in small businesses, and they're to the benefit of many people, but including Black small businesses, some of the highest rate of creation of new Black small businesses in years. We have done the work of capping the cost of prescription medication for our seniors for issues like insulin. And again, I'm speaking to the Black journalists who care about all people, but in particular, I'll talk about the impact on Black people, where we know Black folks are 60% more likely to be diagnosed with diabetes. And we have now finally capped the cost of insulin for our seniors at $35 a month, capped the cost of prescription medication for our seniors at $2,000 a year, because we, unlike the former president who promised to do it, we finally have allowed Medicare to negotiate drug prices against the big pharmaceutical companies. And these are just some of the accomplishments. Is the price of groceries still too high? Yes. Do we have more work to do? Yes. And I will tell you, I do believe that I offer a new generation of leadership for our country that is about, in particular, turning the page on an era that sadly has shown us attempts by some to incite fear, to create division in our country, and to do the work that is about bringing some level of optimism and, dare I say, ambition about what I know is possible in our country. And so my plan for the economy includes what I imagine and believe and call an opportunity economy. What we can do to grow an opportunity economy where all people have access to the resources to compete, to apply their incredible work ethic, their ambition, their aspirations, and their dreams, and actually not just get by, but get ahead. And I can talk in more detail about it, but specifically, I'll mention a few things. Yeah. One of the big issues that affects people right now in terms of the economy and their economic well-being is we have a shortage of housing supply. It's too expensive. People can't afford to buy a home. You know, we grew up, our parents, where they had the ability to somehow believe the American dream was attainable. Not so much for younger working people. And I recognize that. So my approach is a new approach, which is to say, let's just take this and deal with it head on. And part of my approach is to say, I'm going to employ and engage the private sector, in particular home builders with tax credits, to give them the incentive to create new housing, 3 million by the end of my first term, and understanding that not everybody is, handed a silver spoon, but works hard and is trying to save up for a down payment. Part of my plan under my opportunity economy is to give first-time home buyers a $25,000 down payment assistance so they can just get their foot in the door to be able to then engage in what will prove to be their opportunity to build intergenerational wealth. And here's my personal experience coming at that. I grew up a middle-class kid. My mother was hardworking. She raised me and my sister Maya. She saved up. And it was only by the time I was a teenager that she could afford to actually buy her first home. And I know, and I identify with, I know where I come from.
Madam Vice President.
And I know, but I'm just going to finish. I know that so many people work so hard and should have the opportunity to just get their foot in the door. Again, so it's not just about getting by, but getting ahead. Please.
I'd like to ask you more about the opportunity economy. Housing is a part of it, as well as expanding the earned income tax credit, financial support, as you mentioned, for first-time buyers, and a $50,000 tax deduction for startups and small businesses. But I want to talk to you about the squeeze that millions of Americans are also dealing with that impacts their ability to work and make money, and that is child care and elder care. And it's a squeeze for millions of people. In some parts of the country, it costs more for child care than for rents. I think Bloomberg recently reported an average of $33,000 a year. So I'm just wondering, you mentioned that in your opportunity economy, a child tax credit, but that's just one part of an ecosystem. Please tell us, what plans will you propose to guarantee that families can actually afford child care and elder care?
So to your point, it is sadly the state of affairs in our country that working people often have to decide to either be able to work or be able to afford child care. Like they can't afford child care and actually do the work that they want to do because it's too expensive and it doesn't actually level out in terms of the expense versus the income. My plan is that no family, no working family should pay more than 7% of their income in child care. Because I know that when you talk about the return on that investment, allowing people to work, allowing people to pursue their dreams in terms of how they want to work, where they want to work, benefits us all. It strengthens the entire economy. We saw, for example, during the pandemic what happened. And it sadly has dissipated as a conversation that we need to resuscitate, which is the number of women that had to leave the workforce because of a lack of child care and home health care. And so many of our families, and particular women, end up carrying the responsibility. Men do too, of course. What we call people who are in the sandwich generation.
Exactly.
Who have young children and are also taking care of their parents. And it is just absolutely too expensive for them to be able to work and do that. So my plan is not only about 7% of income for working people for child care, but also we need to do better for our child care providers and our home health care providers in terms of ensuring that they receive the wages that they deserve based on the dignity of their work. I have spent time with home health care providers, and their work is some of the most taxing work you can imagine. And I actually, when my mother was sick with cancer, did a lot in terms of taking care of her. And the work that is about taking care of a loved one, in particular an elder, is extraordinarily heavy in terms of the emotional toll, the time it takes, and we do it because that is what we do, but not everyone has the ability to take time from work to do it. and they need help. And we need to make sure we have home health care workers that can help them. But I want to also get back to the earlier point that you made about extending the child tax credit. So part of my new approach is we need to expand the child tax credit. And so part of my plan that is under an opportunity economy is to extend and expand the child tax credit to $6,000 so that young families in particular, for the first year of their child's life, which is an extraordinarily important time in their development, have the resources to be able to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy children's clothing, and not have to worry about whether they're going to be able to meet their other needs. And I don't need to remind anybody here, especially these esteemed journalists, but when we expanded the child tax credit a couple years ago, we reduced Black child poverty by half. And so again, if you talk about the benefit, and if you think about the benefit to the economy overall, it strengthens our economy to do things like pay attention to affordable child care, affordable home health care, and extending the child tax credit.
Madam Vice President, Black men, as you know, are a closely watched voting bloc. You've hosted Black men at your residence.
Yep.
You have engaged Black men and centered them in your economic opportunity tour. But polling shows that some Black men, particularly young Black men, are considering voting for Donald Trump, and they see him as better for the economy. What is your message to young Black male voters who feel left out of this economy, and how can your economic policies materially change their lives?
So I appreciate the spirit of the question, but I'll tell you, I've often been asked this question in a way that I've had to respond by first saying that I think it's very important to not operate from the assumption that Black men are in anybody's pocket. Black men are like any other voting group. You gotta earn their vote. So I'm working to earn the vote. Not assuming I'm going to have it because I am Black, but because the policies and the perspectives I have understands what we must do to recognize the needs of all communities. And I intend to be a president for all people. Specifically as it relates to what we need to do, to your point around economic opportunity. Yes, I started way before I was at the top of the ticket at what I called an economic opportunity tour, focused on Black men. Understanding that, for example, we have so many entrepreneurs in the community who do not have access to capital, but they've got great ideas, an incredible work ethic, the ambition, the aspiration, the dream, but don't have the relationships necessarily. So my work has included, as vice president, getting billions more dollars into community banks, including working with the big banks to do that, so that we can increase access to capital for our small businesses, for our startups. Part of my plan under my economic opportunity plan going forward is that right now, startup entrepreneurs, small businesses only get a tax deduction of $5,000. Nobody can start a small business with $5,000. So I'm expanding that to $50,000. Understanding, again, that when people have the opportunity to have the resources to get started, they're going to put the good ideas, they're going to put the hard work into it. And part of what I also know is that our young Black men, our Black men, just like any group of people, anybody, our small businesses are really the backbone of our economy overall. And when they do better economically, we all do better. Part of my work is about understanding what we need to do in dealing with, for example, the historic inequities that have faced the Black community around home ownership, right? I don't have to go through the history with anybody here about what that has meant in terms of redlining, what that has meant in terms of biases and home appraisals, and what the impact it has had on stemming the opportunity to build intergenerational wealth because of those obstacles. So part of the work that I have done and will continue to do is identify, speak truth about those obstacles, and address them. Another example is medical debt. 1 in 4 Black families or individuals is more likely to carry medical debt than others. So part of my perspective, and as vice president, part of the work that we have done is to say that we're going to eliminate medical debt from being on your credit score. Because Until now, medical debt worked against your credit score, and people know their credit score like your weight, right? You know that number. And the difference between what that number is and what it needs to be is the difference between you being able to get a car loan, a small business loan, or even a leasing on an apartment. And so part of my approach is understanding the obstacles that traditionally and currently exist to allow anyone, including black men, be able to achieve economic wealth. And I'm gonna tell you, I don't think it is sufficient to just only talk about economic policy around reducing unemployment. It is an important marker, and I'm proud of the work that we've done thus far, but it should be a baseline there, everybody's working. The point is, do people have an opportunity to build wealth? If that's what they choose to do, if that's what they want to do. And a lot of my perspective as we go forward is just that. I believe that there are a lot of opportunities that are available to the American people if we just see people and understand what they want for themselves and their families, and then meet them where they are.
Madam Vice President, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the war in Gaza. Mm-hmm. You've called for a ceasefire hostage deal and a two-state solution as an end to the war for many months now. And while you've expressed support for Israel to defend itself, a two-state solution and a ceasefire are at odds with what Benjamin Netanyahu has said is their right to defense. If it matters, as you say, how Israel defends itself, where do you see the line between aggression and defense? And our power as Israel's ally to do something?
Okay, a lot to unpack in what you just said. So let's start with this. I absolutely believe that this war has to end, and it has to end as soon as possible. And the way that will be achieved is by getting a hostage deal and a ceasefire deal done. And we are working around the clock to achieve that end. Stepping back, October 7, 1,200 Israelis were slaughtered, and actually and some Americans, by the way, in that number, slaughtered. Young people who were attending a concert, women were horribly raped. And yes, so I have said, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would.
But Madam Vice President, I think my ask is the difference between aggression and defense.
No, but it's important to put it in context, which is what I'm doing, and I'll get to that. And so how it does so matters. And far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed, women and children. We have seen with horror the images coming out of Gaza, and we have to take that seriously. And we have to agree that not only must we end this war, but we have to have a goal of a two-state solution, because there must be stability and peace in that region, inasmuch as what we do in our goal is to ensure that Israelis have security and Palestinians in equal measure have security, have self-determination and dignity.
A question for you on that, though. What levers does the U.S. have to support Palestinians in their right to self-determination? And is it even possible as Israel's ally?
Well, absolutely. I will tell you, I have been actively involved in, for example, meeting not only with Israeli officials, but with Arab officials to talk about how we can construct a day after scenario where we participate in ensuring those exact goals that I outlined, including as part of the principles that should be applied to those goals, that there be no reoccupation of Gaza, that there be no changing of the territorial lines in Gaza, that there be an ability to have security in the region for all concerned in a way that we create stability, and let us also recognize in a way that ensures that Iran is not empowered in this whole scenario in terms of the peace and stability of the region. But absolutely, the United States of America absolutely has a role, which is why we have been active, in particular with the Qataris and the Egyptians, around attempting to get a deal done and get it done as quickly as possible.
But Madam Vice President, just to follow up really quickly, is there a specific policy change that you, as President of the United States, would say you would do that would help this along? Because you've gotten a lot of credit for emphasizing the humanity of Palestinians. But what I often hear from folks is that there's no policy change that either you or President Biden have gone and said they would do. Is there a specific policy change as president that you would do in our helping of Israel?
We need to get this deal done, and we need to get it done immediately, and that is my position, and that is my policy. We need to get this deal done.
But in the way that we send weapons, in the way that we interact as their ally, are there specific policy changes?
Well, Eugene, for example, one of the things that we have done that I am entirely supportive of is the pause that we've put on the 2,000-pound bombs. And so there is some leverage that we have had and used. But ultimately, the thing that is going to unlock everything else in that region is getting this deal done. And I'm not going to disclose private conversations, but I will tell you I've had direct conversations with the Prime Minister, with the President of Israel, with Egyptian leaders, and with our allies. And I think we've made ourselves very clear this deal needs to get done in the best interest of everyone in the region, including getting those hostages out who, I mean, we saw the latest example of what happened with the 6 most recently, one of whom was an American citizen.
But what do you say to those that say that's not enough, that stopping the 2,000-pound bombs the one time wasn't enough, that this administration, your possible administration, has to do more?
Well, we are doing the work of putting the pressure on all parties involved to get the deal done. But let me be very clear also. I support Israel's ability to defend itself. And I support the need for Palestinians to have dignity, self-determination, and security as we move forward and get a two-state deal done. But right now, the thing we need to get done is this hostage deal and this ceasefire deal. We need a ceasefire. We need the hostage deal.
I want to switch gears to racial justice, Madam Vice President. Last month, you eulogized Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee.
Yeah.
Jackson Lee's signature bill, one of a few, was H.R. 40, which would create a commission to study the history of U.S. slavery and study the issue of reparations. She introduced H.R. 40 every session of Congress, taking up the mantle from Congressman John Conyers. This is a bill that you have co-sponsored as a U.S. Senator. Yet, this has, despite the fact that this has been, similar commissions have been created on the state level and on the local level, is yet to pass in Congress, let alone come out of committee. Congresswoman Jackson Lee, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, and other advocates have called for President Biden to take executive action to create this commission. Would you, as president, take executive action to create this commission, or do you believe that it should happen in Congress?
Well, first of all, as you mentioned, Sheila Jackson Lee, she was an extraordinary leader who we just recently lost, and she was a friend and a real champion for so many issues. So I feel compelled to say that about her. On the issue of what we need to do going forward, look, first of all, we just need to speak truth about history in spite of the fact that some people would try and erase history and try and teach our children otherwise. We need to speak truth about the generational impact of our history in terms of the generational impact of slavery, the generational impact of redlining, of Jim Crow law. I could go on and on and on. These are facts that have had impact. And we need to speak truth about it. And we need to speak truth about it in a way that is about deriving solutions. And frankly, I think that we, and part of that is studying it to figure out exactly what we need to do. But part of what we can do right now is, for example, what I'm talking about in terms of building an opportunity economy, which is addressing explicitly the obstacles that historically and currently exist and dealing with them. Student loan debt, medical debt, bias in home appraisals. What we need to do in terms of dealing with an issue that I have championed for years, black maternal mortality, which is the fact that black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die in connection with childbirth than other women. And we know that the reasons for that include disparities that pre-exist her pregnancy, including disparities that exist in the system during her pregnancy. So all of those things must be addressed.
But do you have a position on whether that should happen, this commission should happen through executive order or via Congress?
I think Congress ultimately will have the ability to do this work. I'm not discounting the importance of any executive action, but ultimately Congress. Because if you're going to talk about it in any substantial way, there will be hearings, there will be a level of public education and dialogue that, and I think that was part of the spirit behind the congressional action thus far, to ensure that everyone can participate in this conversation in a way that elevates knowledge about history and the reference points that have that are the impetus of this conversation. Especially again when people are trying to deny history, when people are, so-called leaders are saying that enslaved people benefited from slavery. I mean, let's talk about the delta here in terms of the work that needs to be done. It's profound.
Madam Vice President, I want to move to Springfield, Ohio, and what's happening there. We've seen school closures, parents worried about their kids leaving the home because of racist conspiracy theories that I won't repeat here, but they have been repeated by leaders on the Republican side, President Trump, former President Trump, and Vice Presidential nominee J.D. Vance. From your perspective, is this just a case of irredeemable racism that can't be mitigated by any rational action, or is this a situation in which a federal response could help this community heal? There's a question of resources and...
Well, no, I'll let you finish and then I'll speak.
No, please.
It's a crying shame. I mean, my heart breaks for this community. There were children, elementary school children, who it was school photo day. You remember what that's like? Going to school on picture day? Who were dressed up in their best, got all ready, knew what they were going to wear the night before, and had to be evacuated. Children. A whole community put in fear. And I'll say a couple things about it. One, I learned a long time ago in my career, having a background as a prosecutor, when you have these positions, when you have that kind of microphone in front of you, you really ought to understand at a very deep level how much your words have meaning. I learned at a very young stage in my career that the meaning of my words could impact whether somebody was free or in prison. As Attorney General, I was of California, 5th largest economy in the world. I was acutely aware that my words could move markets. When you are bestowed with a microphone that is that big, there is a profound responsibility that comes with that. That is an extension of what should not be lost in this moment, this concept of the public trust. To then understand what the public trust means. It means that you have been invested with trust to be responsible in the way you use your words, much less how you conduct yourself. And especially when you have been and then seek to be again President of the United States of America. And so I go back to, it's a crying shame, literally. What's happening to those families, those children in that community, not to mention what is happening in terms of, look, you say you care about law enforcement resources being put into this because of these serious threats that are being issued against a community that is living a productive, good life before this happened. And spewing lies that are grounded in tropes that are age-old. And look, I said it not very far from here the other day at the debate. This is not new. This is not new in terms of these tropes. This is not new in terms of where it's coming from. And, you know, whether it is refusing to rent to people, rent to black families, whether it is taking out a full-page ad in the New York Times against 5 innocent black and Latino teenagers, the Central Park 5, calling for their execution, whether it is referring to the first black president of the United States with a lie, birther lies. And look, the American people deserve, and I do believe want better than this. I do believe that. I know, the vast majority of us as Americans know we have so much more in common than what separates us. I know that. I know that regardless of someone's background, their race, their gender, their geographic location, I know that people are deeply troubled by what is happening to that community in Springfield, Ohio. And it's got to stop. And we've got to say that you cannot be entrusted with standing behind the seal of the President of the United States of America, engaging in that hateful rhetoric that, as usual, is designed to divide us as a country, is designed to have people pointing fingers at each other. It's designed to do that. And I think most people in our country, regardless of their race, are starting to see through this nonsense and to say, you know what, let's turn the page on this. This is exhausting and it's harmful and it's hateful and grounded in some age-old stuff that we should not have the tolerance for. So let's turn the page and chart a new way forward and say, you can't have that microphone again.
Madam Vice President, I'm switching gears again.
Okay.
Quick question. I want to talk to you about gun control. So you've said you support an assault weapons ban and universal background checks, and we actually learned during the debate that you are a gun owner. Mm-hmm. But in cities like Philadelphia, handguns are responsible for most homicides and violent crime. The most recent FBI data shows handguns were involved in 59% of murders in our country. How will you address the issue of the use of handguns? Because a push for an assault weapons ban only addresses a significant but small part of the problem.
So, first of all, yes, I am a gun owner, and Tim Walz is a gun owner, and we're not trying to take anybody's guns away from them. But we do need an assault weapons ban. Assault weapons are designed to kill a lot of human beings quickly,
yes,
and have no place,
ban.
have no place, I'm gonna get to it.
Yes.
And have no place on the streets of a civil society. We need universal background checks, which, to your point about handguns, is about saying that it is just reasonable to want reasonable gun safety laws that say we should do background checks that we ought to know. It's just reasonable. You might want to know before someone can buy a lethal weapon if they've been found by a court to be a danger to themselves or others. You might just want to know.
And respectfully, we do understand that.
But you're asking
yes.
about...
I'm asking specifically about handguns, because many of those handguns aren't purchased in places.
Universal background checks apply to handguns.
Yes.
They do.
But in
And
many instances, those handguns aren't even bought lawfully. Yes.
Which is why I also have been very adamant for years. In fact, I myself protested at a gun show probably 10, 15 years ago about the gun show loophole and why we need to close that. Because what ends up happening is that gun shows at flea markets, gun dealers are not, under existing law in the past, required to register their sales. And so you are exactly right that a lot of homicides, for example, a good number of them, I don't have the statistic in front of my mind, are committed with illegally purchased guns. And that's why we need to address each entry point in the issue, including universal background checks, closing the gun show loophole, and what we need to do as a general matter to focus not only on reaction to crime, but prevention of crime. So you're raising a very important issue that has many facets, including what we need to do in terms of reasonable gun safety laws and what we need to do around crime prevention, what we need to do around crime deterrence. But listen, I have personally prosecuted homicide cases. I have held the hands of mothers who have come to me crying, who have said, I only want to talk to Kamala, because they knew when they sat down, I would treat them with the dignity and respect that they were entitled and due about the loss of their child, often their son, to gun violence and the need to take it seriously. And we must take it seriously. In every way, understanding it's not just about a soundbite. It's about a comprehensive approach that deals with the tragedy of, to your point, everyday gun violence in America. It's real. It has had a profound impact in terms of trauma that for the most part has gone undiagnosed and untreated. The trauma that exists in communities around the violence of losing their children, losing a brother, losing a father, an uncle. All of that must be addressed, and we have to have a holistic response to it.
Are there things we haven't thought about yet? Because every time we bring up this issue of gun violence, universal background checks comes up and a ban on assault weapons. Are there other solutions that you're also thinking about that will get at this issue?
Absolutely. For example, part of what we did with, so we, as vice president and with the president, we were able to pass the first meaningful gun safety legislation in 30 years. And part of what that involved was millions and millions of dollars to put more mental health counselors in public schools, right? Because we know that there is an aspect of this that is about treating the trauma and dealing with it at its source before it ends up manifesting itself in a problem. There is the work that we need to do that is about putting resources into communities around violence prevention. I've been a big advocate of that for years, which includes what we need to do around putting resources into community-based intervention that is not just requiring on the good people in the community to volunteer to do the intervention, but actually paying people to do it because it's a full-time job. It's about understanding what we need to do to, again, understand that, to your point, we have to have a holistic response to this issue and prioritize it instead of reacting to the tragedy that, sadly, they are too predictable. Let's all agree, enough of that. There are very few solutions that we haven't thought of. We need to put the resources into them.
Madam Vice President, we want to move to the topic of reproductive access, something that you have worked and leading on both for the administration, Democrats, and now the top of the ticket. You've said that as president, you would want to codify Roe. If it came to your desk, you would sign a bill that did that. Roe protected access until fetal viability, which it also says is, quote, at about 7 months, but it may occur earlier, even at 24 weeks. So do you similarly support also codifying Roe's restrictions, which allowed states to ban abortion in the 3rd trimester of pregnancy unless necessary to save the mother's life?
We need to put the protections of Roe v. Wade back into law. And when that bill gets passed by Congress, I will proudly sign it into law. Understand what is happening in our country over 20 states have passed what I call Trump abortion bans, because I understand how we got here. The former president handpicked 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. They did as he intended, and in state after state, laws have been passed criminalizing healthcare providers. I don't know if anyone here has heard most recently the stories out of Georgia. Tragic story about a young woman who died because it appears the people who should have given her health care were afraid they'd be criminalized after the Dobbs decision came down. Laws that make no exception even for rape or incest, which means that you're telling a survivor of a crime of a violation to their body that they have no right to make a decision about what happens to their body next, which is immoral. An approach that doesn't take into account that most people, I think, agree you don't have to abandon your faith or deeply held beliefs to agree the government should not be telling her what to do with her body. If she chooses, she will talk with her pastor, her priest, her rabbi, her imam, but it should not be the government or Donald Trump telling her what to do about her own body and her life. So that's where I stand. We need to put back in place the protection of Roe v. Wade and put that into law.
And those restrictions that are also in.
We need to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade and let an individual, in consultation with her doctor, make the decision based on what she can determine, because she's smart enough to know what's in her best interest instead of having her government tell her what to do, especially a bunch of people in these state capitals who think they're in a better position to tell her what to do than she is to know what's in her best interest.
Before we conclude, Madam Vice President, Joyful Warrior has been used to describe your campaign.
You didn't see that just a minute ago, though. Okay, I'm back to my joyful part.
And your opponent and Republicans have at times weaponized you laughing in campaign ads, for example. Why is joy important to you to insert into this election? And what do you make of Republicans using that as a way to suggest that you're not a serious candidate?
Well, sometimes I think, and I'll say to whoever the young people are who are watching this, there are some times when your adversaries will try and turn your strength into a weakness. Don't you let them. Don't you let them. I find joy in the American people. I find joy and optimism in what I see to be our future and our ability to invest in it. I find joy in the ambition of the people. I find joy in the dreams of the people. I find joy in building community. I find joy in building coalitions. I find joy in believing that the true measure of the strength of a leader is not based on who you beat down, but who you lift up. And I think we should all find joy and have a sense of optimism about who we are as Americans and what we mean to each other and what we can do to lift each other up.
Madam Vice President, President Biden spoke to former President Trump after the attempt on his life this weekend. Have you spoken to him?
I have.
And earlier today, I assume?
Yes.
How'd that go? You want to give us some intel?
Sure. I checked on him to see if he was okay.
Yeah.
And I told him what I have said publicly. There's no place for political violence in our country. I am in this election and in this race for many reasons, including to fight for our democracy. And in a democracy, there is no place for political violence. We can and should have healthy debates and discussion and disagreements, but not resort to violence to resolve those issues.
On January 6th, your vehicle was allowed to kind of pass a viable pipe bomb. We've seen...
No, I was in the building.
You were in the building. And we've seen what's happening with former President Trump. Do you have full confidence in the Secret Service to protect all of you?
I do.
You feel safe, you and your family?
I do. But, I mean, you can go back to Ohio. Not everybody has Secret Service. And there are far too many people in our country right now who are not feeling safe. I mean, I look at Project 2025, and I look at, like the The Don't Say Gay laws coming out of Florida, members of the LGBTQ community don't feel safe right now. Immigrants or people with an immigrant background don't feel safe right now. Women don't feel safe right now. And so, yes, I feel safe. I have Secret Service protection. But that doesn't change my perspective on the importance of fighting for the safety of everybody in our country. And doing everything we can to, again, lift people up and not beat people down so they feel alone and are made to feel small and made to feel like they're somehow not a part of it or us.
Madam Vice President, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. I've appreciated this. Thank you. Thank you.
So now both candidates for president have officially met with the NABJ to have a conversation there in Philly. The vice president was interviewed by a panel of 3 National Association of Black Journalists, as you saw there, those 3 members. White House correspondent, managing editor of politics at the Griot, Garen Keith Gaynor. Also Eugene Daniels, Playbook co-author and White House correspondent for Politico. And then also you see there where the panel still is as we follow these live pictures in Philly. And maybe we can hold on these live pictures while we wait for... Actually, we just got a shot of the president of the NAACP there just a moment ago as well. But also Tanya Mosley, co-host of Wise Fresh Air with Terry Gross and Tanya Mosley. So, you know, watching this discussion compared to the discussion when former President Donald Trump also met with a panel of journalists there at NABJ. It was a different tone, a different conversation, and also a different time. The president very much under fire with a lot of questions from the journalists just for the rhetoric that was taking place at that point in time when he sat down with those journalists, and it got pretty contentious pretty quickly. This conversation, you know, we're still dealing with a lot of dangerous political rhetoric, but the tone was a little more calm. The vice president there just felt, it seemed actually quite relaxed compared to other town halls and interviews that she has done. But it did get contentious there for a moment when journalists were challenging her just on gun laws and the fact that it can be so easy to purchase a firearm in our country. And of course, just thinking about the mass shootings and the recent assassination attempts on the former president as well. It brings the discussion of guns right back into the fold. All right, senior White House correspondent Selena Wang was listening as well to that discussion from the White House. Your thoughts, Selena?
Yeah, Kira, well, look, I think there were many moments where Vice President Harris did not directly answer the question. Instead, she would shift the message to go back to some of her stump talking points. But this is a really rare moment, this interview, for the American people to see her talking in this unscripted format for quite a long time with a panel of reporters asking her tough questions. She has not done this very often. The first question is one that is on a lot of American minds. The first question out of the gate, which is whether or not Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago. She did not offer a yes or no, but said that there's more work to be done. She said she offers a new generation of leadership for our country, and she also contrasted the situation from when Trump left office. But again, no specifics there, so I think American people are still going to be questioning where she stands on some of these issues.
All right, Selena Wang there at the White House. Appreciate it, Selena. All right, well, something else that's happening this hour. The Senate is voting right now to advance the right to IVF. It's considered a symbolic move because, unfortunately, the bill is likely to fail. But Democrats are hoping to put Republicans' feet to the fire close to Election Day.
I'm not asking Republicans to head into combat. All I'm saying is just vote on this. Simply support this bill that represents millions of women's only chance at starting families.
Joining me now, the sponsor of that bill, Illinois Senator Tammy Duckworth. She's headed straight to the floor to give a speech, so let's get right to it. Senator, thank you so much just for being patient with us as we were following that live event with the Vice President, of course, there speaking with the NABJ and the journalists there. We wanted to make sure we gave fair time to the former president, who also met with those journalists. This time it was the time for the VP to have her turn. But let's get now to the vote here. It's expected to fail. So I want to hear why stick with this? Why move forward, make a speech, and push for this bill anyway?
Well, because since the last time we voted on it in the early part of the summer, we've had President Trump come out to say he supports IVF. And since the last time we voted on this bill, numerous of my Republican colleagues have come out and said that they support IVF over and over again over the course of the last several weeks. And so this is their chance to come ahead and come to the floor and vote on it. I'm giving them another chance to vote. All this bill does, it's very simple. It just creates a statutory right for you to access assistive reproductive technology, so that if you live in a state where they have defined life is beginning at the minute an egg is fertilized, well, that could potentially prevent doctors from providing you an IVF. And this bill would simply create a federal right for you to access IVF without fear of being treated as a criminal. And so I say to my Republican colleagues, put your vote where your mouth has been for the last 2 months. Come vote for this.
So Trump has said that he supports federal funding for IVF. Why don't you believe him?
Well, because Trump misleads people all the time. But more importantly, it doesn't matter if you have federal funding for IVF if you have state law that is in such a place where you can't access IVF. It's like saying, I'm going to mandate that the federal government pays for automobile insurance for you, but you're not allowed to buy a car. So if you don't have a car, what's the point of having automobile insurance? It's sort of the same thing. In all of these states, state after state after state that have defined a fertilized egg as a human being, it means that doctors who have to discard fertilized eggs that are non-viable, like when I was going through IVF, I created 5 fertilized eggs. 3 were non-viable, so we had to discard those 3 because if my doctor had implanted them in me, they would have caused a miscarriage. And so when we discard those 3 fertilized eggs, that could be manslaughter under many of these states' laws that say that, hey, you're discarding human beings. And so it doesn't matter if Donald Trump says he's going to mandate federal coverage if he doesn't support this statutory right that would be enshrined by this law that we're putting on the floor today that says, you know what, regardless of what the state law is, you have the right to access assistive reproductive technology.
I didn't realize your 5 embryos. You and I both have talked very openly about our experiences with IVF. I, too, had 5 embryos, and I am blessed with twins because of the availability I had to IVF. So, and I don't think you and I ever had a chance to talk about our personal stories. So I hear you, I feel you, and I think it's important that, you know, we are, whether we are journalists or leaders in this country, that we should talk openly and honestly about things like this, because I think for a lot of other people, it carries a sense of shame. They don't feel comfortable telling their personal stories. So maybe this is an opportunity, because I know our time is tight with you. You need to go on and do the business at hand. But if you don't mind, a final question. Addressing the role of personal stories, because it does make an impact when it comes to moving policy forward.
It very much does, and thank you for bringing this up, because I think IVF today is where breast cancer was in the 70s. You know, nobody talked about breast cancer. It was so deeply private and personal, and nobody talked about it until Betty Ford, President Ford's wife, our First Lady at the time, spoke about her own breast cancer diagnosis and treatment, and even brought cameras into her hospital room when she was recovering from treatment for breast cancer. And since then, we started talking more openly about breast cancer. And and so many lives were saved because people started getting breast exams, and people realized how many families and people that they love were touched by breast cancer. I think that's where we are with IVF as well. It's why I've talked openly about it, because another woman talked to me openly about her journey and pointed me the way towards the assisted reproductive technology that resulted in me having my daughters. And so talking about infertility is not a shameful thing. It's actually helping to let people know that this is a common human condition, and it is also very human to want to start your families, and that's what this bill is about, creating that statutory right to be able to start your family if you want to without government interfering in your very deeply personal decisions about when and where to have your family.
Senator Tammy Duckworth, so appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Turning to international news now, Hezbollah pointing the finger at Israel for a deadly attack involving a series of pager explosions targeting its members. CCTV actually showing the moment. One of the hundreds of explosions took place at a supermarket in Beirut. The Lebanese Ministry of Public Health says 9 people were killed, more than 2,800 injured, including 200 critically wounded. Hezbollah says that a child is among the dead. Foreign correspondent Tom Sufi-Burridge has the latest for us. Tom.
Yeah, this was a highly sophisticated attack, Kira. These pager devices held by members of Hezbollah right across Lebanon and potentially, according to unconfirmed reports, in Syria too, have exploded. Now, whoever carried this out, Israel has not claimed the attack. Hezbollah is firmly pointing the finger of blame at Israel. But what had to happen, clearly, is that a quantity of explosive had to be planted probably inside these devices. Then it had to be triggered remotely. And we're seeing videos of individuals, presumably members of Hezbollah, in places like supermarkets, standing there looking down to what appears to be their pager device, and then the explosion happening. And it's happened right across the country. So that is the scale. The sophistication of the attack is clear, and therefore that is why the suspicion of blame will be pointed at Israel, probably its external security service, Mossad. And look, Israel does not claim attacks, generally speaking, against its enemies in its near abroad, against Iranian proxies like Hezbollah. But it's a moment of tension. Israeli officials have been warning in recent days that the window of opportunity to avoid a broader conflict with Hezbollah is running out. And what is not clear, that I think is important to underline right now, Kira, is whether or not this move, if it was the Israelis, firstly, to what impact has it really debilitated Hezbollah? What impact has it had on their commanders and their broad command structure? And whether or not, if it was the Israelis, whether this is the precursor of a wider move by the Israelis, potentially against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Kira?
All right, Tom Sufi-Burridge, thank you. I'm Kira Phillips. Thanks for streaming with us. A lot more news ahead. Don't go far.
Whenever news breaks,
we are here in Israel, a nation at war.
In Rolling Fork, this tornado tore through this town.
From Lewiston, Maine.
The scene of a horrific mass shooting.
From the scene of that deadly missile strike.
ABC News Live everywhere.
In Iceland, let's go.
On the 2024 campaign trail.
Here at 10 Downing Street.
Wherever the story is.
We're going to take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live, streaming free everywhere. What does it take to be the most watched newscast in America?
An operation to capture ISIS fighters.
Is this our Combat Operations Center?
We're approaching the gate now. Militants came in from 4 or 5 different directions. Operational nuclear reactor. So you have a couple loaded and ready to go. The house is destroyed, but the flag, there's not a tear in it.
Not a tear in it.
How important is this label right here, Made in the USA? Look at your smile. You're proud of this.
I love this.
Great work. Hi. Where are you? Where are you?
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
David, good to meet you.
Ismail? David.
David.
Yes, yes. I'm David Muir.
I know who you are.
You
Watch
do?
you every night.
ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast.
Why
Why do so many people start their day here?
From ABC News, this is Start Here.
To be in the know and get a different take on the day's top stories.
A lot of news today, so let's get into it.
Listen now to the Daily News Podcast honored with 4 Edward R. Murrow Awards and see why the New York Times calls it a news podcast worth listening to. Start Here, ABC News. Make it your daily first listen.
Now, that's a part of the story I bet you didn't see coming.
Wherever you get your podcasts, start here.
Here's to Good Mornings in America.
Can you feel the love?
Oh, yeah.
Mornings that inspire, filled with hope, kindness, joyous surprises, and so much fun.
This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy.
Start your day with Good Morning America's Ray of Sunshine, highlighting the best of America and helping
Make dreams come true. Wow. I'm just so happy. It's so good.
get ready to smile and put the good into your morning, America, because
You know what will make the morning better? A little ray of sunshine.
Hi, I'm Andy. And I'm Sabrina. And we're moms, juggling tons of stuff every day, like all you moms out there. And you know what we love? Really love? Pop culture. So what happens when being obsessed with pop culture collides with being a mom? You get us. So listen now to our new podcast, Pop Culture Moms, wherever you get your podcasts.
Reporting from outside Wembley Stadium, surrounded by Swifties as Taylor Swift is set to kick off 5 sold-out concerts. I'm Maggie Rulli. You're streaming ABC News Live.
You're watching America's #1 streaming news. Live reporting, breaking new exclusives. Keep streaming with ABC News Live.
And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. Our top story this hour. Back on the trail, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump both campaigning today, just 2 days after the apparent assassination attempt at one of Trump's Florida golf courses. Harris taking questions from a panel at a National Association of Black Journalists event in Philadelphia. It comes as the VP has been hammered by Trump and other Republicans for not being more available to the press. Joining me now, senior White House correspondent Selena Wang. Also, our Jay O'Brien is up there on the Hill. So, Selena, Harris was pressed on foreign policy, particularly the Biden administration's response to the war in Gaza. Let's talk about how she responded.
Yeah, look, she was pressed about how her policy towards Israel and Gaza might be different than that of President Biden's, and she did not directly answer the question or offer any policy specifics, but she repeatedly said that we need to get a deal done. Take a listen to what else she said here.
We are doing the work of putting the pressure on all parties involved to get the deal done. But let me be very clear also. I support Israel's ability to defend itself. And I support the need for Palestinians to have dignity, self-determination, and security as we move forward and get a two-state deal done.
Since Harris announced her candidacy, she's been very careful, Kira, to not have too much daylight between her views and that of President Biden. So everything she said on foreign policy very much tracks with President Biden's views. Now, there were multiple times, though, during this interview where Vice President Harris did not offer a specific answer. Instead, she pivoted and returned to her talking points that she wanted to hit, particularly on a question about whether or not Americans are better off today than they were 4 years ago. But really, this panel interview with NABJ, it is a really rare moment where we've seen Vice President Harris take extended questions from reporters. We have not really seen that much since she became the candidate, so this was notable. I am told from the campaign that she plans to step up her interviews and her campaigning, but she's going to mostly be doing that with local interviews and non-traditional outlets. So really a rare moment here today.
Indeed. And Jay, Harris was asked about what's unfolding in Springfield, Ohio, as well, after the false claims about Haitian migrants by Trump and other Republicans. Her response?
And the impact those claims have had, Kira, and she talked about that. And she essentially used that time to say that in her view, if you are the nominee of your party or certainly the president of the United States, your words have impact and your words have power. And she criticized Trump for propagating this false claim about Haitian immigrants in Springfield. And it's something, by the way, we've also heard some Republicans in Ohio do as well. Mike DeWine, for instance, if you think back to this weekend, his conversation on ABC's This this week with Martha Raddatz didn't necessarily go so far as to criticize Trump, but he said that those claims about Haitian immigrants in Springfield are not true. And so Kamala Harris takes all of that, criticizes Trump for not understanding, as she somehow put it, in some form or fashion put it, that his words have power, and then used that to criticize his record in previous statements he's made, not just about race, but also conspiracy theories and things of that nature.
Selena Wang, Jay O'Brien, thank you both. Hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs pleading not guilty to federal charges while making his first appearance in a federal courtroom in New York City. The rapper was arrested and charged in a federal indictment accused of racketeering, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. The explosive allegations accuse Sean Combs of perpetual verbal, emotional, physical, and sexual abuse, trying to control his victims through physical violence with the promise of career advancement. His attorneys deny all the accusations, saying he's an imperfect person, but he is not a criminal. Joining me now, ABC's Phil Lipoff, also legal contributor, and defense attorney Shauna Lloyd. So, Phil, let's talk about what's going down in court right now.
All right, it's happening right now. Sean P. Diddy Combs went into court in Manhattan just a short time ago. Right off the bat, we want to let you know he pleaded not guilty to this 3-count indictment that, as you mentioned, accuses him of racketeering, conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, and transportation to engage in prostitution. And it goes on. Those are just the 3 counts. But within this indictment, there is forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, obstruction of justice. One of the questions asked today at a news conference when they unsealed the indictment was, why did it take so long for this to happen? This is one of the reasons. There is a lot in this indictment, and they were definitely getting their ducks in a row. As I said, Combs pleaded not guilty, but this is a damning indictment.
It sure is. And Shauna, what do you make of the prosecutor's indictment? If you were Sean Combs' attorney, how good would you feel about your client's case right now?
Well, right now, it seems like from this indictment, they have a lot of information. It looks like they've spoken to a lot of witnesses and they've gathered a lot of information, which tends to mean they've built this case very thoroughly and methodically. That never bodes well for a criminal defense attorney. However, there's a lot more information that has to come out, that has to be exchanged hands. Although it's written in the indictment, we have not seen, and the defense attorney has not seen all the evidence that backs up these charges. And that's going to be what's most important to defense counsel.
So, Phil, prosecutors are seeking to have him detained now in federal custody while he awaits trial, calling him an extreme danger. I mean, those are pretty strong words.
An extreme danger to the community. Those are very strong words. And if you read through this indictment, you'll understand why. Some of the quotes that we have, our Aaron Katersky is in court right now. The defendant physically and sexually abused victims for decades. They said he is a serial abuser and a serial obstructor. They say they have talked to a dozen witnesses who could testify to seeing women injured as a result of violence Combs inflicted. And that is just really the beginning, Kira. So when they say he is an extreme danger to the community, that's what they're talking about.
Well, Shauna, the indictment also outlines forfeiture allegations. Tell us what that means and how important that plays into all of this.
So that's really important because what the U.S. government is essentially saying is that anything that's been derived from this criminal enterprise, he has to forfeit. It would become property of the U.S. government. And when we look at the amount of entities that he's in charge of, that he's making money from, all of those could be subject to this forfeiture if they can show that the proceeds were derived from criminal activity. This is a significant amount of assets and dollars. So when we talk about forfeiture, it's very important to remember that there's a monetary aspect that the U.S. government can take back once they can show it comes from and is derived from the criminal activities they're alleging.
All right, Phil Lipoff, Shauna Lloyd, thank you both so much. Overseas, Hezbollah is pointing the finger at Israel now for a deadly attack involving a series of pager explosions targeting its members. CCTV actually shows the moment one of the hundreds of explosions took off at a supermarket there in Beirut. The Lebanese Ministry of Public Health saying that 9 people died. More than 2,800 were injured, including 200 other people critically wounded. Hezbollah says a child is among the dead. Foreign correspondent Tom Sufi-Burridge has the latest for us. Tom.
Yeah, this was a highly sophisticated attack, Kira. You know, these pager devices held by members of Hezbollah right across Lebanon and potentially, according to unconfirmed reports, in Syria too, have exploded. Now, whoever carried this out, Israel has not claimed the attack. Hezbollah is firmly pointing the finger of blame at Israel. But what had to happen, clearly, is that a quantity of explosive had to be planted probably inside these devices. Then it had to be triggered remotely. And we're seeing videos of individuals, presumably members of Hezbollah, in places like supermarkets, standing there looking down to what appears to be their pager device, and then the explosion happening. And it's happened right across the country. So that is the scale. The sophistication of the attack is clear, and therefore that is why the suspicion of blame will be pointed at Israel, probably its external security service, Mossad. And look, Israel does not claim attacks, generally speaking, against its enemies in its near abroad, against Iranian proxies like Hezbollah. But it's a moment of tension. You know, Israeli officials have been warning in recent days that the window of opportunity to avoid a broader conflict with Hezbollah is running out. And what is not clear, though, I think is important to underline right now, Kira, is whether or not this move, if it was the Israelis, firstly, to what impact has it really debilitated Hezbollah? What impact has it had on their commanders and their broad command structure? And whether or not, if it was the Israelis, whether this is the precursor of a wider move by the Israelis, potentially against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Kira?
All right, Tom Soufi-Burridge, thank you. Let's continue the conversation now with Chris Costa, the former senior director for counterterrorism at the National Security Council. So, Chris, what do you need to do to successfully pull off an operation like this?
Well, I think first and foremost, Kira, you have to have excellent intelligence. It has to be actionable, predictable, continuous, thorough. So it really underscores an intelligence operation that is also wrapped in covert action, meaning it's plausibly deniable. So the state isn't going to leave its fingerprints all over the evidence, as it were. So I think it's a sophisticated operation. It's remarkable in its execution, and a lot remains to be uncovered in terms of who may have done this. But your guess is as good as mine.
You know, we've talked about this type of terrorism, really, that's taken place in Iraq. I mean, we witnessed it there first time with pagers, cell phones. But let's talk about this specific incident. And do you see this in any way, you know, first of its kind? Or does this not surprise you that it's come down to something like this?
So that's a great question. So first and foremost, sabotage is a part of a state's toolkit. And this was sabotage. It was designed also to kill or wound adversaries. So that's not unlike all the history that we talk about here, where I'm at the Spy Museum, in that sabotage is classic. It was done during World War II. The idea of interdicting supplies and affecting essentially resupply and the logistics chain. All that has happened throughout history. But the level of sophistication with pagers is really significant. And I think it is a bit of a technical paradigm shift, if you will. The idea that it was synchronized to happen at the same time, the idea that perhaps whoever pulled this together interdicted the supply chain, knew when they could do that, accessed it, and also placed the right amount of explosives. They would have had to test all of this. It would have been timed crucially. So it is just a remarkable operation. And it's classically, as I said, a covert action. I just find it really stunning.
What do you think? Is this the beginning of a major escalation, you think, in the region?
I think it was preemptive, to be sure. I think that the intelligence service that perpetrated this felt like they needed to initiate the attack before perhaps Hezbollah initiated it first. In other words, there wasn't going to be strategic surprise here from Hezbollah. And I think it was preemptive in nature, and I think that's the rationale for executing now. There's a lot we don't know. That's conjecture on my part, but I think there's been a low-level conflict playing out for decades. It is now ramping up. This is a significant escalation. And the final point I'd like to make is the fact that this is an adaptation really to Hamas and Hezbollah going to low-level couriers and using regular phones, et cetera, and messengers. So this will really put Hezbollah on their heels.
All right, Chris Costa, appreciate you. Thanks, Chris. Straight ahead, a new Instagram feature giving more power to parents over their kids' accounts. Is it enough? One mother who lost her daughter to fentanyl use that she purchased on social media. She gives her opinion next.
Whenever news breaks,
We are here in Israel, a nation at war after that brutal surprise attack by Hamas.
On the ground in Ukraine, reporting from Lewiston, Maine.
The scene of a horrific mass shooting.
ABC News Live is right there everywhere.
From the scene of that deadly missile strike in Dnipro, Ukraine.
Reporting from the earthquake in Turkey.
In Rolling Fork, this tornado tore through this little town.
From the most devastating disaster in Hawaii.
From Charleston, South Carolina, on the 2024 campaign trail.
In Iceland, let's go.
Traveling with the president in Mexico City.
Wherever the story.
From the front lines from southern Israel.
Outside the Gaza Strip.
In Beirut.
From the FBI.
Reporting from the nurses on the picket line.
Here at 10 Downing Street in London.
Streaming live to you.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is, we're going to take you there.
You're streaming.
ABC News Live.
ABC News Live.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live, streaming free everywhere. America's #1 streaming news.
First thing in the morning.
There's a lot going on.
We're still in a flash flood warning.
To catch you up with what happened overnight, clashing over national security.
What's happening today? Tensions in the Middle East.
What people are talking about. The worries